Hello, everybody, and welcome into a new edition of the Patriots Beat podcast here on the CLNS Media Podcast Network and on Patriots Press Pass on YouTube. And today's show is powered by our friends at LinkedIn. Make sure to use that link, linkedin.com/beat, to post your first job for free on LinkedIn. But before we get into the live Q&A portion, we are going to answer questions here on the air. So please put the questions in the chat, and we're going to get to those in a few minutes. But we want to start as we let some people cycle in here and start to ask those questions, Alex. With the Week 14 slate, the Patriots, Bill Belichick out on Nantucket, some nice pictures with Linda Holiday and Nike out there going on some walks, and a big smile on Bill's face with that great winter jacket that he seems to love so much that we just keep seeing popping up everywhere that he goes. But a very happy bye week Bill Belichick gave the Patriots Thursday through Sunday off, coming off this 7-game win streak, a big win in Buffalo last week. Bill gave the players an extended weekend, himself an extended weekend. But as the Patriots were enjoying their bye week, the NFL went on, obviously, without them for a week. And there were a lot of things happening here from a Patriots perspective. I didn't get to watch Bucs Bills in its totality yet last night, but obviously a game that I left for a family dinner, and the Bills were getting blown out. And then I looked down on my phone and it's in overtime. So something crazy happened. Alex, fill us in on exactly what happened with that game, and I'll fill in with some of the things I was able to watch.
Yeah, I think so. I thought going into that game, it was going to be the opposite. I thought the Bills coming off, historically bad loss. It taught, there was the question asked after the game, was this embarrassing? They took it personally. I was like, all right, this team's going to come out, shot out of a cannon. They're going to be so fired up. But ultimately, Tampa's talent, as it usually is going to be too much. And it ended up being the other way around, where the Bills came out slow, and they were the ones playing catch up. And that kind of surprised me. But it does sort of feel, even though, look, division, that might be it. That might bury them. But it does feel like a Bills team that looked dead in the water at halftime of that game. They might have their mojo back. And again, I don't necessarily know what that means at this point in the year, where they're 2 games back. They've already lost one to the Patriots. Like, they still might be locked into a wild card, but that's a team that was on their last breath, and they somehow pulled themselves back from the abyss. We'll see what happens next week against the Carolina team. They should beat handily. But, as we look ahead, and we all thought, 2 weeks from now, all right, party at Foxborough, Bills come in, they're a broken team, Patriots clinched the division. We'll see what happens with Josh Allen, right? He came out in a walking boot, but the Bills seem to be back up. And the Bills might be the most inconsistent team in football, and that's not great. But I do think when that Bills team is up, they're a force. So, yeah. I if you're a Patriots fan, even though the Bucs won and you get that breathing room, I hate moral victories. I especially hate moral victories in December, but that really felt like something clicked for the Bills. Despite, by the way, Sean McDermott's best efforts. That whole game at the end was an exercise in who can make the worst coaching decision, right? A bunch of nonsense from McDermott. Again, just didn't have his team ready. Whatever the weird thing they were doing with only running Josh Allen, to sort of do what Belichick did the week before, but like change it a little bit. And then Bruce Arians going 4 verts with 3 minutes to go in a 3-point lead. Bruce Arians calling that timeout at the end of the game, where you saw Tom Brady mouth on the sideline. What happened? Once again, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won in despite of Bruce Arians, not because of him. And I'm starting to wonder more and more, especially if the Bucs lose this year. Like, I think past 45, contract runs until he's 45. I don't think he's coming back here, obviously, but I'm starting to wonder if there's going to be a third team on Tom Brady's resume, or at least a third coach, because I could see him going LeBron and telling Bruce Arians, because it's kind of getting ridiculous at this point.
Okay, so Bruce Arians and the Bucs win a Super Bowl last year in Brady's first year, and you think that he is going to out Bruce Arians?
He had a 2-minute drill with Tom Brady as his quarterback in the Super Bowl and wanted halftime. Let's not forget that. I don't think Brady's forgotten that.
Yeah.
Like, I know Evan, let's be honest. Why did they win that Super Bowl? If you're going to rank the reasons they won that Super Bowl, where exactly is Bruce Arians on that list? I don't know that he's top 20.
Okay. Well, let's not get too crazy. Number 1 is Tom Brady, obviously. Number 2 is of course, is probably Todd Bowles, right?
I put Todd Bowles ahead of him.
Yeah,
but I'd also put like Mike Evans, like Chris Godwin.
Right. We might find out that Byron Leftwich is ahead of Bruce Arians at some point here.
Wouldn't surprise me, honestly.
Yeah,
would not surprise me.
Okay, but I want to get back to some of the things with Buffalo though, because I thought 2 things that you said. One I want to get really into, and one I thought was interesting. First and foremost, the Bills coming back in that game showed me a little something too. Right. The Bills could have very easily. They came off the Monday night loss to the Patriots where they were upset in their own building we know the story of that game, right? We don't have to go over it again. Then they get down big to Tampa Bay at halftime. They're down 24-3 to Tampa Bay, and it could have been over, right? They could have rolled over, season almost over at that point, right? You lose to Tampa Bay 31-3 after losing to the Patriots at home the week before. That feels like a team that's dead in the water, right? They didn't do that. They pulled themselves up. They got the game to overtime. I thought that was extremely impressive for the fact that they were able to hold Tom Brady until that Rashad Perriman touchdown in OT. The Bucs offense only had 3 points in the second half of that game, and they were able to figure some things out on their offense with Buffalo. So, yeah, impressed by Buffalo to come back in that game and rally back in that game. I thought that was super impressive. With that being said, I think the biggest thing that really stood out to me from that game from projecting forward is that the Bills cannot run Josh Allen 12 times a game. He's already in a walking boot, right? I mean, he already got hurt from it in this Bucs game. It doesn't sound like it was anything serious, and the walking boot was more a precaution. But if that's not a message to the Bills and to Brian Daboll and Sean McDermott that they cannot run this quarterback 10 plus times and expect that Josh Allen is going to carry their rushing attack every single week, then I don't know what is. You don't want to see your quarterback in a walking boot after the game. I don't care if whether or not it was real or not. I don't care if the injury is that serious or not. That's a bad news, and we'll see. We'll see how it affects him, right? Because this is not to say that this is going to completely spiral for Buffalo, but this is how it started with Patrick Mahomes' foot injury last year, right? It wasn't a big deal. Oh, he's going to manage it. And all of a sudden he's having offseason surgery on the foot. So there is a lot to look at with that Bills game plan and the way that they were able to awaken their offense and get some things going on the ground. A lot of Bills fans and Bills media that I've paid attention to over the last couple of weeks has been clamoring for Buffalo to involve Josh Allen in the run game, to use him like he's prime Cam Newton, right? And because they had such a issue running the football just traditionally, just by turning it over to the back and running the football down people's throats, because they couldn't do that, they have been begging Brian Daboll to use Josh Allen as a run threat from out of the backfield. That is a slippery slope, and Josh Allen has such a great arm and is such a great passer when he's on his game that he's not Cam Newton. He's not Lamar Jackson. He's not somebody that is dependent on his legs, right? He's not somebody that needs to be that kind of quarterback in order to be at his best and to thrive. So I think that's a very slippery slope for the Buffalo Bills and not a sustainable way of offense for the Bills moving forward. Now, can they get defenses to clue in or key in on Josh Allen as a run threat and have that open up running lanes for the backs, right? I mean, read option type of plays where everybody's crashing down to the quarterback. I guess in theory they could, but I think if you're a team like the Patriots and Bill Belichick, you're saying if you want Josh Allen to run the ball 12 times against us in week 16, go ahead, right? Because at some point, Kyle Duggar or Donta Hightower is going to catch up to him And that's not going to be an engagement that you want if you're a Bills fan when Kyle Duggar is hitting Josh Allen in the open field on a run play. So I don't know. It's a great one game sort of wrinkle against the defending Super Bowl champions, a really good football team in Tampa Bay, to throw a run game strategy with Josh Allen as a featured back in your backfield. That is not going to be something that is going to work long-term or work as a sustainable way to move the football for Buffalo the rest of the season. I would be shocked if he runs the ball that many times again. I think one walking boot's all it's going to take to be like, okay, let's chill out with Josh running the football.
Yeah, and I think I said it last week when we were talking about it. Why didn't they run Josh Allen down there when they got in the red zone? And it's, you don't want to run the quarterback too much, risk him getting hurt. There's certain games where there's certain moments where you take that risk. And clearly the Bills thought that Tampa game was that moment where we'll risk our quarterback getting hurt in this game, because if we lose, the season's over. And look, I don't disagree with that assessment. I think that's a game where you put the quarterback on the line. And I had no problem with them running Josh Allen as much as they did last night. But how was the end of that Patriots game not as, if not more dire? Like, right. I look back at that and say, if we're going to second guess the Bills, all right, so you'll run him this much against the Bucs, fine. Where was that against the Patriots? Was this an overcorrection? And again, like you said it perfectly, I don't think that's sustainable. I don't think you can run him like that for another, whatever it is, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and then go into the playoffs, because he's going to be banged up. I mean, look at what the Ravens are dealing with Lamar Jackson. Right. Look at what the Browns are dealing with Baker Mayfield. These quarterbacks that can hit a ton. You get to the Cardinals are another one, Kyler Murray. And granted, Josh Allen's bigger than those three guys. He can absorb hits better, which makes him a much more, you talk about Cam Newton. That's where he leans a little more Cam Newton, maybe Ben Roethlisberger. Right. But you really don't want your quarterback getting hit that much. There's times where it's going to have to happen, and they did it.
One hit, right? Because it feels like he's indestructible because he's so big, right? And so I would with Cam. It felt like he was Superman, right? That nobody he would run the ball 100 times a year and never get hurt. Well, I'm not saying that's gonna be what the Bills are gonna do with Josh Allen. He's gonna run the ball 85 times a year, but all it takes is one hit, one shoulder, one ankle, right? You never know, and I don't know that like I said, that walking boot in the post-game press conference, if I was a Bills fan, if I was Brian Dable, that would be it for me. I would say, all right, well, that's it.
Well, I'd push back a little bit on what you said. Like, obviously there can be one hit, but I think you also have to consider even not the majorly impactful hits, but you get hit 12, 13, 14 times a game. That it adds up. Like with Cam Newton, I did this at the end of the 2019 season. I haven't updated it for the last 2 years, but if times hit, so that's sacks, quarterback hits, and carries where the ball carrier didn't go out of bounds, right? So essentially times he was tackled. Cam Newton had been hit 800 times. It's something around 800 times. The exact numbers are on my Twitter. Right. Around 800 times since he came in the league. The next closest was Russell Wilson at 500.
Yeah.
You can't tell me, and this is nothing against Cam Newton. Again, it's the way he played. But you can't tell me that, you get hit 300 more times, almost twice as much as the next closest quarterback. You can't tell me that doesn't have something to do with Cam Newton starting to fall off at the age of 32. And that's obviously, much more of a macro picture. But to look at it within the Bills, how much do you want Josh Allen getting hit? Because they do add up, and it is going to impact him. And there, it's a cost benefit analysis, because you don't want to not run him because you're leaving opportunity on the table, but you don't want him to get the crap beat out of him either. And again, I think the Bills probably leaned a little more towards running him in that game because they knew they had to win, but they can't do that in every game here down the stretch.
Yeah, agreed. And in Tennessee, or was that game in Jacksonville? I'm blanking, but that game was over before it started. That game was in Tennessee. Trevor Lawrence, and look, I think that this is not a Trevor versus Mac take, right? Because if you redrafted it today, all 32 GMs, I think Bill Belichick included, still take Trevor Lawrence over Mac Jones. I think all those people, those anonymous league executives that are saying Mac would go number one overall, I don't buy it. I still think Trevor goes number one overall regardless. But at the same time, a testament to the infrastructure, to the coaching, to the foundation, to the leadership in the locker room from the Patriots veteran standpoint of making it a much more cushiony, breezy experience for Mac Jones. Whereas things could not possibly, in that report from Tom Pelissero, added to it, right?
Did you see the one today?
I'm sure they'll just keep coming out. I mean, it is a terrible situation, and Trevor Lawrence, they are absolutely ruining Trevor Lawrence's development as a result. He threw 4 interceptions in that game. Some of them were really ugly interceptions, right? Just throwing them right to linebackers over the middle and things like that. And I don't think this has anything to do with Trevor Lawrence. This has 110% to do with the Jacksonville Jaguars and that organization as a whole just being an absolute nightmare.
So here's the one today. Demetrius Harvey, he covers the Jaguars for Big Cat Country. Quote, Jaguars head coach Urban Meyer was asked about Andre Cisco playing more again. He said, Cisco is playing a little bit more, I believe. I don't have the numbers in front of me. You want to guess how many defensive snaps Andre Cisco played on Sunday?
Oh, boy. 0.
You want to guess? 0. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's probably – and by the way, he forced a fumble on the opening kickoff.
Yeah.
And then they didn't put him in on – like, I don't know what Urban Meyer is watching on Sundays. It's clearly not the Jaguars games. We saw the video. He's interested in the wrong blondes. Okay. He's interested in the wrong 20-something-year-old blondes. I just – was that too far? I thought of that one earlier. It's an embarrassment. Yeah. It's an embarrassment.
I feel bad for Trevor Lawrence because
I feel really bad. I feel bad for Lawrence.
I think a really good comparison from a skill set standpoint for Trevor Lawrence is Andrew Luck. I think they are very, very similar quarterbacks.
It's the same way.
It's to a degree. Like Indianapolis at least gave him a foundation to win 11 games 3 years in a row, right? I mean, they were in the playoffs and they were able to at least coach it and build it around him. This is just like a complete and utter failure.
It's again, right. I think, and look, I don't just feel bad for Lawrence. I feel bad for James Robinson. I feel bad for Josh Allen. I feel like that Josh Allen. They got a lot of talented players on that team, like young, talented players. And Urban Meyer just seems completely and I'm not even going to put it on the assistants.
Yeah.
I'm not, because, you see the report from Pelissero. He's making people pull out their resumes in meetings.
Yeah.
On one hand, this is exactly how we knew this was going to go. Urban Meyer was kind of a trash person at Ohio State. He was at Florida. I don't know why that was going to change why anybody thought that was going to change in the NFL, but the Jaguars don't fire coaches. They generally let them get about 4 years. So this may be it for Trevor Lawrence. And it goes, luckily, we're not going to have to do the quarterback draft discussion for the Patriots' sake again, really for a long time, it seems like. But when we do, I mean, it really applies to any player, but I think especially with quarterbacks, me and you are going to be on here in March and April. We're going to be talking about, do we like this player or this player? Is this player of more upside than this player? The floor of this player versus the floor of that player. Like, it's so dependent on where they go, like nature versus nurture, right? And we forgot that. And myself included, I think we really put that aside in the spring. And I want to make sure when we come back and we do the draft talk again, and I know it because it turns into cop-outs. It's, well, which player do you like better? And you say, depends where they land. But I want to make sure when it comes to talking about draft prospects, because Trevor Lawrence is a much better player than the player we have seen for the Jacksonville Jaguars so far this season. This is a pure and utter failure on the part of Urban Meyer. It starts and stops with him. Any other dysfunction within the organization is a product of him not knowing what he's doing running an NFL ball club.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got to shout out our sponsors at LinkedIn. Then we'll wrap up
Urban Meyer
week 14 slate here and get into some of the questions. But first of all, LinkedIn, these days, it can be hard to find and hire the right candidates for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs made it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 770 million people. Focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience and use screening questions to get your role in front of only the most qualified. Then use the simple tools on LinkedIn Jobs to quickly filter and prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/beat. That's linkedin.com/beat to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. 2 last games here I want to hit on, Alex.
You had a perfect setup there. Because I'm just going to teach you for a moment here. It's a bye week. We can get into this stuff, self-scouting. You had the perfect setup going into that LinkedIn
Urban Meyer
read.
thing. You're right.
Yes, you had that right there.
The Jaguars are going to use the LinkedIn job /beat. They're going to use that URL, and they're going to post their head coaching job in a couple of hours here once Urban Meyer is fired. You're right.
There you go. See, you gotta find like creative ways to get in and out of it. Because the trick is, if you just say, all right, we got to do our ad read, people are like, all right, I'm going to go take a leak because they know that an ad's coming. You got to just seamlessly get into it without them even realizing you started the ad read. That's the whole
LinkedIn will appreciate that. So Josh Allen just came out now. Bills coach Sean McDermott said that Josh Allen sprained his foot and is officially day-to-day. So
sprained
So speaking of sprains, Lamar Jackson
sprain a bone.
You can sprain a foot apparently, according to Sean McDermott. Speaking of sprains, it also sounds like Lamar Jackson has an ankle sprain, so maybe that's more what McDermott is being a little bit more vague than what John Harbaugh was earlier today. Jackson obviously left the game against the Cleveland Browns. The Browns end up beating Tyler Huntley and the Baltimore Ravens in that game. It was close there at the end. Baltimore recovers an onside kick and nearly gets into field goal range for Justin Tucker. I thought 4th and 6, Alex, at the end of that game versus Justin Tucker from 68 yards. What you got? I think the wind was. I think they were going into the wind, which was a factor in terms of trying to attempt a long field goal. I think Tucker might have been good from 68.
Well, you claim Justin Tucker is the greatest kicker of all time, so I'm sure you would have taken him.
Definitely the greatest regular season kicker of all time.
I don't know. Adam Vinatieri in his prime, I think I kicked that field goal. I don't like. Here's the thing: if Lamar's in the game, I think it's a no-brainer. You go for it. I think without Lamar, it's. I don't know that it's the perfect comparison, but sometimes when it comes down to it, and I think there's probably some analytics, but this is just me using common sense. Who do you want to have the ball in their hands, or I guess on their foot? Like who? Is it? All right, I can put the ball in Lamar Jackson's hands, or just would I rather the game be up to Justin Tucker, be up to Tyler Huntley? Nothing against.
You there, Alex? We're having some internet connection issues here with Alex, as this is a great
kick. Did I cut out?
Oh, yeah, you cut out there. Oh, you're back.
All right, everybody got the point of what I was saying, I think.
Yes. Yeah, and last but not least, then we're going to get into the questions here. KC versus Vegas. I find this game really fascinating from so many perspectives because, first and foremost, over the last 5 games, the Chiefs have averaged only 14 points a game in games not against the Raiders, right? They are absolutely smoking the Raiders, and it's inflating a lot of their offensive production. I don't know how much I can actually put into this. I don't think anything that the Chiefs were able to hang 50 points on the Raiders, or nearly 50 points. But are the Chiefs back? How much do they worry you, if at all, in this AFC playoff race? They're obviously 9-4. They're right there with the Patriots and the Titans at the top of the conference. But it does feel like they've beaten up on the Raiders team that they pretty much have the Raiders number. And the rest of the games that they've played have been much closer.
Yeah, I kind of go back to what I said with the Bills. I mean, I know that they're just beating up on one opponent, but it's the best time of the year to get hot. And the reality of it is that game happened, right? And now they're in a rhythm, they're in a groove, they're seeing things well. So I'm not going to count out Patrick Mahomes. Like, I'm not stupid.
Yeah,
he's the best quarterback in the league. He's the best quarterback in the league. Like any the Bucs, the Packers, the Chiefs. I'm not counting out those teams because they just, when a good quarterback gets in a rhythm, you really can't do anything about it. So big game on, what is it, Thursday night, right? Chargers, Chiefs. Yeah. That's a huge game. That to me is a huge game. I think we will learn a lot about both of those teams in that game, but the Chiefs scare me as much as anybody in the AFC. And it's honestly as much their defense, their offense. It seems like they've figured things out defensively. And that was their Achilles heel early in the year, is that defense was historically bad. So yeah, I'm not writing the Chiefs off at all. The only team I'm writing out at the top, at the top there are the Baltimore Ravens, because the injuries are piling up. Now Lamar Jackson's hurt, and we've seen them kind of be inconsistent. To me, it's, and I know one of these teams lost yesterday, but to me, it's, I think the Chiefs, in terms of like right there with the Patriots at the top of the AFC. I think it's the Chiefs. I think it's the Chargers. And honestly, the Bengals. They're young, so they're a little inconsistent, but when that team gets on its groove, man, they've got some players. So that to me is, I feel like I'm missing somebody, but that to me is the top tier in the AFC.
Yeah.
I guess the Titans, if they were healthy, but they're not.
This Chiefs team reminds me so much of that line in the 2009 football life with Bill Belichick and the Patriots, where Belichick said, we have Moss deep and we have Welker underneath and nothing else. And with the Chiefs, you just put Tyreek Hill in for Randy Moss and Travis Kelce in for Wes Welker. And it feels the same way, right? If you force Patrick Mahomes, and it's easier said than done. There's no doubt about that. It's easier said than done. But the Patriots, I feel like, are a team that do have the connectivity on defense to execute a game plan where they have a safety over the top of Hill and they're doubling Kelce, right? I think that they have the execution and the personnel to go ahead and execute a plan like that. If you can get Patrick Mahomes to beat you throwing to McCole Hardman and Brian Pringle and the backside of the backfield and some of these other weapons that he has outside of Hill and Kelce, and he successfully does that, and if Clyde Edwards-Helaire runs the football against you and they beat you without their fastball, right? They beat you playing left-handed, then you tip your cap and you say, you're a great team. You guys deserved it, right? Because to me, I still think this Chiefs offense is game planable. I still think that there is a game plan that other teams this year have used against them. The two high shells, things like that can be effective. Force them to try to run the ball, force them to dink and dunk down the field. I think with Belichick, it'll probably be throwing the kitchen sink at Travis Kelce, right? Jams, doubles, brackets, the two guys on him, inside out, high-lowing him, all those types of things, right? All the different types of things that Belichick does against these great tight ends. But most importantly with Kelce, you pop him a couple times early on in that game with Matthew Judon and Kyle Van Noy on the edges. He's prone to tap out a little bit.
Yeah.
Then you keep the safety over the top of a Tyreek Hill. You take away the big plays. Like I said, if he beats you throwing to Brian Pringle, then he beats you throwing to Brian Pringle on Jalen Mills. Like, what are you going to do? Right. So I think that that's a team that I still look at and say, okay, yeah, they're the Chiefs. They're Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. The defense is playing a lot better football. That's a scary team for anybody to play against. But I do think that their offense, there is a way to scheme and plan for that offense. So I think that's going to be very interesting to see if that matchup comes about later on in this season. Okay, finally, Q&A time. We wanted to recap Week 14. Let's segue into these questions now. If you have questions for Alex and I, drop them in the chat. Now's your chance right now. Fire away, and we will answer as many as we can over the next 30-plus minutes or so. So I wanted to start with this question here, and I got to go back and find it as people are busy in the chat today, Alex. A lot of chatting going on. It was about Miles Bryant, though, and his role on this team moving forward. I think Miles Bryant has played very, very well. I do think that there are some limitations to his game in man coverage, but as a whole, he's a very solid player for the Patriots. But the question is John Jones will be back next year for New England, still under contract. Is Miles Bryant earning a long-term role, or do we still think that he is just a depth option in the slot behind Jonathan Jones?
Well, I think Miles Bryant's value is that he can play so many different positions. That's not to say he's not a good player. He obviously is, but I almost look at him as, to cross sports here, kind of like a Brock Holt or Kike Hernandez kind of player where he can play in the slot. He can play safety. If you really need him to, he can play outside. I think just having that guy to give you all around depth on your secondary, like that in enough is worth keeping him around. And whether or not he develops into a starting caliber slot corner, a starting caliber deep safety, remains to be seen. He's a very young player. It's only his second year in the league, but I think at the very least, the fact that he can give you serviceable snaps at 3 or 4 different positions, he's a guy that you're going to keep a part of the team, and a guy who should be a part of the team. So that, that's kind of my take on him, is at the very least, he's back and he's got, 1 year left on his deal. Plus then he'll have the RFA year, which I'm sure the Patriots will use. So, 2 years in, all right, we know he's a serviceable player. And then over the next 2 years, we wait and see, okay, does he become something more than that? Does he become a starting caliber player? I don't know if it'll happen or it won't. I think he can do it. But he's definitely a player. He's definitely a guy that's a part of the plan.
I find it fascinating still. I tweeted this out the other day that the Patriots cut Myles Bryant to start the season. He didn't make the 53-man roster out of training camp. Now they would really be in a tough spot if Myles Bryant, with Jonathan Jones going out for the year. Without Myles Bryant around, they'd be in a really difficult spot in that nickel. We could have Brian Poole playing nickel corner for the Patriots or something like that. So really...
Well, that may also, by the way, let me correct myself. There is no RFA year. There is no, he's in a contract year because they cut him.
Yeah.
It gets rid of that. Oh, no, he is under contract next year. Okay. So all right. It is still that contract. I don't know how that works. I thought they cut him.
Huh. So no, he's an RFA in 2024 or 2023, 2020. Right. He's under contract next year. And then he's an RFA the year after that.
So they signed him to a 3-year deal when they re-signed him.
Yeah. So really interesting play. I agree with you, though. His versatility, I think, is his calling card right now. His ability to play multiple different techniques as well, whether it's man-to-man or also a couple of different spots in their zone coverages. He's able to play the flat. He's able to play like a hook seam defender. He's able to play deep if they want him to play deep, right? So he can play a bunch of different levels of the defense as well, which I think is critical too, to the way that they've evolved defensively this year. So I think he's a very useful player. I think he's going to have a role on the team next year. Is John Jones going to come back in and be the de facto number 1 slot corner? Yes, but I do think that Myles Bryant will be a bigger part of that secondary than what the plan was going into this season. He was not necessarily in the plans to have a huge role, assuming Jones stayed healthy. I think next year will be treated a little bit differently. Looking at this matchup against the Colts, I'm glad that we can get into this a little bit. Do you think the Colts matchup is practically 2 similar schemes going up against each other in a battle of who executes it better? I'm assuming that Luke is speaking to the fact that both teams want to run the football, right? But I will say right off the top here, they run the football very differently. They get to their runs very differently. They scheme up their runs very differently. So although it's stylistically a similar matchup in terms of what they want to put on the quarterback and how they want to lean on their run game, from a schematic standpoint and X's and O's standpoint, 2 very differently designed styles of run games.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think stylistically, schematically, they're very different, right? Yeah. Does that so like? On both sides of the ball. I think you have 2 teams where the rosters were constructed, in very similar ways, but then the way they went about using those players, you kind of hit that fork in the road and go in 2 different directions. So it actually is very interesting. It's a very interesting game in that sense. That's a good point to make, because I think I'll give him credit. I think Chris Ballard's done a good job. And when he made that comment, remember the rivalry's back comment he made after the Josh McDaniels thing? I was like, oh boy, here we go. The Colts are full of themselves. They've done a good job building this team, and they put a lot of faith in Carson Wentz. It goes to a point we've talked about, Evan, a number of times on this show that I have made, that I don't think you need an elite quarterback to win in the NFL. Everything else right. And they've built up this strong offensive line, which was, the Colts' weakness for years. Was that they didn't have an offensive line. They built up an offensive line. I think they hit a home run with Jonathan Taylor. I can't remember who the other backs were in that draft. I remember there were like 4 top backs in that draft, and Taylor was the guy, and other teams missed it, and they nailed it. They've made some good moves on defense. I thought trading for DeForest Buckner, that was a good move. I really like Darius Leonard as a player. I do. They've done a really good job of building a roster that wins in a very particular way, similar to how the Patriots have done it. And then when you get to the coaching level, they've approached it completely differently, and they've still found success with it. So there's a lot of interesting layers to this matchup from a roster construction and an X's and O's point of view, where it's, the same but also different.
Yeah, it's interesting from a schematic game plan perspective for me is what does Bill Belichick decide in this game that he truly wants to take away? Because I think on paper, the obvious answer is to take away the run game and take away Jonathan Taylor. But the Bucs did that last week in the first half against Indianapolis there in week 13 before the buys. They did that against Indianapolis. They took away the run game in the first half playing base defense. But at the end of the first half, Indianapolis started to run empty formations. They started to run 5 wide. They spread out the base defense, and they were picking on matchups in the middle of the field with the linebackers and the safeties, and they really threw the Bucs out of their base defense and forced Tampa Bay to put their nickel package on the field. Once they got into nickel, it was Jonathan Taylor down your throats, right? So that's the difficult part about this Colts offense from a game plan matchup standpoint to me for the Patriots is the in-game chess match between Frank Reich and Bill Belichick. Reich, I saw last week, I think the biggest thing that you look at a team like Buffalo, you look at a team like Kansas City, the reason why those teams I think are good matchups for the Patriots are because they can only win one way, right? They can only win a game if it's a pass-heavy game for both teams. It's our pass offense against your pass defense. Well, Indianapolis can win games in a multitude of ways offensively. They can beat you in several different ways. And although Carson Wentz is not Patrick Mahomes, he is a quarterback that is playing pretty good football right now in that system within the confines of Frank Reich's scheme. So I look at this and I'm fascinated to see because I guarantee you if the Patriots put base defense out there to load up against Jonathan Taylor, they are going to check out of the run plays. They're going to get into some pass plays, play action, empty stuff, and they are going to throw the football on the Patriots base defense. They have that fortitude, that ability to adapt, right, to what the defense is trying to take away, and they can attack you that way. So this is a really difficult matchup for New England's defense because the Patriots are a defense that wants to dictate the terms based off the personnel, and they want to make you play left-handed. So I don't know if the Colts truly have a left hand in this game if the Patriots do put base defense out there to stop the run game. So which way do they go? Do they go with one of those game plans where, yeah, we might give up 6 yards of carry to Jonathan Taylor, but they're only going to score 13 points because they're not throwing the ball against us? Or do they go with one of those plans where they really want to force the weight of the world on Carson Wentz's shoulders? I don't know what the best point of attack is. It's kind of a tricky game plan in my mind for the Pats. And I also can't help it but think of Super Bowl 52 and go back to the last time they played. I think they might have played the Colts with Frank Reich in 19 or 18.
In 18. They did in 18.
Yeah.
That was a Thursday night game.
Right. So they did play them once in between, but I can't help but go back to Super Bowl 52 and just remember how much of a challenge that scheme, the RPO concepts, the run-pass balance, all of it was for Bill Belichick and the Patriots defense. So if this Patriots defense can limit and even shut down Indianapolis's offense on Saturday night, I think that really tells me a lot about this Pats D. Beating up on some of these bad teams that they've played, Buffalo in the windstorm, all that kind of stuff is great. But looking at this Indianapolis team and truly being able to stop Indy in a dome in Indianapolis on the road, I think that would be a true statement type of game for the Patriots defense. So I'm interested to see how Belichick goes up against him there. We're trying to get.
Well, I would just add to that too, real quick. I think that the Patriots have a unique ability to play in nickel and still, assuming Kyle Duggar's back, assuming Adrian Phillips is healthy, like
right,
you're in nickel, you have coverage players.
Alex cut out again, but I think I understand where he's going with that. As we'll try to get him back here in a second. That the Patriots can stop the run out of nickel with Kyle Duggar in their 3 safety packages. I agree with that. Looking at the numbers here, though, Indianapolis, 5.6 yards per rush against nickel this year. So a team that really runs the ball effectively against nickel, throws the ball effectively against base. We can see if we can get Alex back here. Are you there?
Yeah. So I would say I think the Patriots nickel is slightly different than every other team's nickel. One more thing here real quick before we jump to the next question.
Yeah.
I was talking about the Colts nailing it in the draft in 2020 with Jonathan Taylor.
Yes.
How about this? So Edwards-Helaire went first, then Swift. Taylor went third. Then Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins, A.J. Dillon. Remember, everybody loved Dobbins. So
right.
They nailed it with Taylor in that draft.
I thought Taylor was the best back, not to like to my own horn or pat my back or anything like that. But I remember us talking about Taylor being the best back in that draft. And I was really surprised that it wasn't a consensus back then. I mean, he was dominant in college.
Why do you think I'm bringing this up? I'm trying to toot my own horn.
All right, let's answer this question here about JC Jackson. I think this might be, when I do my mailbags every single week, this might be the number one question that people ask me is what the Patriots are going to do with JC Jackson. And I pulled the numbers here today, and I really find it quite eye-popping how much better JC Jackson has gotten this season in this number one cornerback role without Stephon Gilmore anymore than what he was last year. So last year, and on plays without Stephon Gilmore, J.C. Jackson was giving up 9.9 yards per target, almost 10 yards per target when Gilmore was not in the lineup. This year, he's down to 6.8 yards per target. His touchdown to interception ratio, he's given up 1 touchdown to 7 interceptions in coverage this year. So the volatility of J.C. Jackson's game that we saw at times last year where there was a lot of boomer bust, right? It was either a pick six in the one direction or a touchdown in the other direction. And there was a lot of ups and downs with J.C. Jackson's game last year. He has really leveled that ship. And now he's just a consistent cover guy, man, zone, can still ball hawk, but can still shut it down. I think his attention to detail and to film study has really helped him out. He talked about that earlier this year, that he was really trying to lock in on that grind with the film study. I think he's really rounded out his game to now not just being a pick magnet and a touchdown interception magnet, but also being able to shut guys down consistently down to down on top of that.
Yeah, I think we don't have enough information yet to answer this question. And it's going to come down to, and here's the thing, I don't think there'll be enough information by the time they have to make the decision. So to me, I think they franchise. I think they franchise them, and then because this is a really good year in the for corners who maybe you need to like give a year or two, right? Josh Jobe, Kobe Bryant, Michael Wright. So if you franchise J.C. Jackson, draft one of those guys, then in 2023, and of course, guys can sign extensions, but 2023 projects to be a really strong free agent cornerback free agent year. So you use a top 60, top 90 pick on a corner this year. You have that guy play behind J.C. Jackson for a year, and then hopefully that guy pans out, and then Jackson moves on off the tag, and you bring in somebody else, right? Basically what they did, I've made this comparison before, but they had Revis in Malcolm Butler,
right?
And Revis was clearly a number one and ace corner. Like he wasn't just a number one; he was an ace. He was a shutdown corner.
Yeah.
Malcolm Butler was very good. He was a number one, but he wasn't quite that ace. So what did they do? They moved on from Revis. They strung Butler along with team control devices like tags until they had a chance to go get another ace in Stephon Gilmore. And in between, it obviously didn't pan. So I think you'll maybe see a similar pattern here where they'll string Jackson. That's probably one more year. They'll draft somebody and give that a shot this year. And if not, or to get that player's, on the other side, they'll go back and dip into the market in 2023 when they can get another true ace. So that's how I see it.
Yeah. I think I think the franchise option for J.C. Jackson is going to be too attractive for Bill Belichick not to do it.
Right, because ultimately it's going to be value. You're going to be paying him significantly less than what you'd pay him on the open market. It's
great value. It buys them, like you're saying, not only in the draft to potentially draft a replacement and go that direction, but it also buys them another year of being able to watch what J.C. Jackson does without a Stephon Gilmore on the opposite side. it feels like a win-win for the team. They keep the player, they keep him in position, one of their best defensive players. They keep him there. I don't think JC Jackson's going to be too disappointed about making $18 million, right? I think that'll be all well and good. And then you revisit it again, seeing if maybe, they want to draft somebody and replace him that way, or pay him at that point. I think either way, it will work out. But that franchise tag is just something that I think is a little bit too attractive from a value standpoint for the team to instead just turn over and say, oh, we're just going to give him the 80 million now. Right. It seems like it'd make a lot more sense to franchise him, at least from a Patriots perspective. All right.
Real quick, just looking ahead, and obviously a lot can change. That 2023 draft, so not this upcoming spring, but the spring after, it's a lot. Yeah. There's a lot of quarterback, like top end cornerback talent in that draft potentially. That could be an elite cornerback draft. So, you keep those in mind. They're not making decisions solely based off it, but I'm sure that's something they're watching. So, keep an eye on it too.
Yeah. All right. Let's go in the trenches. I want to go in the trenches here for a second. And let's talk about Devon Godchaux, who had probably he did have his best game of the year as a Patriot against Buffalo. Now, a lot of the reasons why the Bills were trying to double team at different points of the attack on the defensive ends, mainly Lawrence Guy, Dietrich Wise, Christian Barmore, they saw a lot of double teams. To Godchaux's credit, he wasn't getting doubled in that game, and usually on the nose you get doubled a lot. Against Buffalo, he wasn't. They tried to trust Mitch Morse to just block him one-on-one, and he beat a lot of those blocks by Morse and was able to show out. They have another game on Sunday against Indianapolis, the number one run team in the NFL, so they need Godchaux to show out again. Do you feel like this is Godchaux's arrow pointing upwards, and we're going to continue to see him climb and progress forward, or was this more just a one really good game by Godchaux here?
Well, like you mentioned, I think this was a game. I don't know that it's just like he played really well, but I don't know that it's a game that he played miles above where he's played the rest of the year. I think it's just a game that really highlighted what he does well and allowed him to shine. And he even talked about this at the beginning of the season. The true nose tackle, 3-4 true nose tackle. That guy's job isn't to accumulate stats. That guy's job isn't necessarily even to be in front of the ball carrier. His job is to clog things up front, occupy blockers on the offensive line, occupy space, and redirect plays. And I think he's done a decent job of that this year. He hasn't played a ton, or at least as much as I expected, but I think some of that is just the nature of they've been ahead in these games, and teams are throwing on them. So I think Godchaux has been solid this year. He's not an all-pro or anything, but I think he's been solid this year. And I think that game was more, I see some people talking about him turning a corner. I think it more just highlighted his skill set than anything else.
Yeah, I've had some concerns about him playing true nose. I don't know if he's a true nose tackle in this system, mainly just because he doesn't have the immense size that it takes to play at that spot. So I look at Godchaux, and I've said this multiple times. I feel like Godchaux is a 3-4 defensive end in the Patriots-based defense. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just sort of how I feel about it. And just because of size, ability to take on double teams, ability to not get reached and turned out, he looks to me like he's more comfortable at end than he is at the nose. He was much better on the nose in this game against Buffalo. Maybe that is some signs of things to come, but based off of what I've seen, and it's sometimes limited, Carl Davis has looked better at true nose tackle at times than Godchaux has this year. So I do wonder if they go into next year and look at Godchaux as more of a base end, and maybe they go out and try to find another big body to play that true nose tackle spot. And when we were talking to him a few weeks ago, he mentioned that he loves playing end in this system, right? He prefers to play end in this system because it allows him to go ahead and make some more plays. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see where they see his fit moving forward in terms of long term, if they do feel like he's maybe not a true nose tackle in the type of defense that they want to be playing. All right, let's look at, there was one other questions here about COVID, and I hate to talk about COVID and all this stuff, but I do think it's newsworthy. Adam Schefter just tweeted out that the NFL had 37 positive tests today, according to league sources. So 37 players going on the COVID list. Look, I'm not trying to get into all the vaccine talk. Hopefully we get Alex back here. You there?
Yeah. So is it 37 players or 37 positive tests?
Said 37 total positive COVID.
So that can also be coaches, and I don't think that's just. We didn't see 37 players go on COVID reserve today. Like, we would have noticed that. I think that's coaches and
yeah. Okay, so maybe it's league wide, but this is definitely
still a lot.
It's a lot, and this has popped up a lot more recently in some of these breakthrough cases and things like that. You don't want to see the season turn, right? You don't want to see this head towards something similar to last year. So it's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening with all these positive tests.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, right? You don't want to see a team season derailed because of COVID. I mean, it's just, regardless of who it is, regardless of who you root for, like, you don't want to see a promising team have to bow out because of something out of their control. So we'll see what happens. But I think, the league implemented some tougher policies a couple weeks ago. It was like before Thanksgiving, and maybe we'll see teams start to do the same, especially if you're a team in contention right now. Like, you can't, and it's a big thing for locker room accountability too. You can't be taking, if you're really serious about this, you can't be taking these risks right now. And that's not to say players have to lock themselves inside and, be afraid of the sun or any of that. But I think it's just something that to be cognizant of as you get to this point of the year.
Yeah, it is a bummer. So did Kenny Moore say something? Somebody said in the chat here that former Patriots corner for a little bit for a hot second.
Yeah, he gave the usual. This was like 2 years ago.
It was no fun.
Yeah, not that it was no fun. It was too mentally strenuous.
Yeah,
he compared it to being in the military. He was like, you get up at 5 every morning and you do this and then you do that, and it's like, I don't think anybody's ever said everybody can play for the Patriots. I think it takes a very certain kind of person to be able to succeed in New England. Like, I truly believe that. It's nothing against Kenny Moore. To me, the bigger, if you want bulletin board material from the Colts, it's what Bobby Okereke said today. I don't know if you saw that one.
No, what did he say?
Let me see if I can pull up the direct quote. He called out Mac Jones.
Oh boy. Well, I will say this about this Colts defense, and I actually think based off of what we have seen carry through even post Tom Brady, Josh McDaniels is a very, very good play caller against zone defenses. The Titans came in here a few weeks ago. Remember, Alex, they played a ton of zone defense against the Patriots. Mac threw for 310 yards against them. This Indianapolis team has more dropbacks in zone coverage than any defense in the entire NFL. They are zone heavy to a T. They do not play a ton of man. They're good at disguising. They have very athletic coverage linebackers. They hunt the football in zone. They can turn you over, but they are a zone team through and through. I actually think, as badly as I think the Patriots match up against the Colts offense in a lot of ways, I actually think the Patriots offense looks very, very good on paper against this Colts defense. The Colts defense is a fast, athletic, explosive unit, turnover machine. They play a ton of zone, like I just mentioned, but I think feeds into the Patriots' strengths and Mac's strengths of the passer. I also think they can run on this Colts defense. The Colts, they have some good players up front, DeForest Buckner, Darius Leonard, but those guys are athletic guys. I don't think that those guys are really the ones that want to play a physical, heavy game in the trenches. It reminds me of a lot of ways, the way that they are built, reminds me a ton of the way that the Buffalo Bills defense is built, right? Tremaine Edmonds, Darius Leonard, Ed Oliver, DeForest Buckner, right? Very similar types of players there. I think that the Patriots offense is going to be able to move the ball against this Colts defense. And I don't know, it's not going to be because of bulletin board material, but I just think that schematically they match up pretty well.
So here's the quote from Bobby Okereke, Colts linebacker. They figured out that's a big strength for them. They can run the ball and man-on-man match up well physically against teams. That's a pride point for us, and we're just ready to attack the run and make them one-dimensional and see what Mac Jones can do.
Good luck if you're going to play zone, and good luck, because we've talked about the zone thing a lot, and I think that a lot of it was Brady, but McDaniels is so good at flooding zones and really stressing zone coverage that a lot of the time he's thrown to some pretty open guys when teams play a lot of zone coverage against the Patriots. So if that's the game plan, I think the game's going to look a lot like it did against the Tennessee Titans, where they're not able to really run the ball a whole lot, but Mac is torching them through the air because of the zone stuff. I don't think the Indianapolis is going to man up. I don't. And that's, to me, still forcing the Patriots to beat man coverage, I still think is the way to beat this offense, right? You can catch Mac once or twice with a disguised zone look, right? If it's a zone pressure or if it's a zone exotic rotation or something like that, then yeah, maybe you can get one on him once or twice in a game like Atlanta was able to do, for example. But in order to consistently beat them, down in, down out, drive in, drive out, I still think that you got to man up against New England and go mano a mano. And I don't think this Colts team will. So I like the matchup for the Patriots offense. I think they're going to be able to move the ball against Indianapolis. I don't. Okay, never mind. I misinterpreted that question, so we'll skip that one for now. Let's see if there's any other questions you guys got here. We got a few more minutes. Keep them coming. Keep dropping them. There's a lot of other things being talked about, Alex, in the chat. So getting through all of this to figure out where the questions actually are is not the easiest. But
did you block that one account yet? Like,
yeah,
you got naked videos on your YouTube. Congratulations.
Yeah. It's always difficult to block accounts like that because you don't want to accidentally pull the tweet up on the screen, right? So there's like a very little block tab that you can hit, and you got to hit it right on the money, otherwise it pulls up the tweet on the screen. So
look, I'm just saying, we're here for football. Like, I don't know who that person they think they're advertising to. This show, we just care about football. That's it. The rest, that's a distraction. Deal with that, and after the Super Bowl.
Okay, all right. Let's answer this question about Hightower,
please.
I think I think this question about these questions about Hightower are really interesting because I almost think like the year off for Hightower kind of made people forget about exactly what made him a good player in the first place, right? And every single time people see Hightower in coverage or see him in space chasing after somebody, you get the tweets, you get the moans, you get the groans of, oh my God, he's so slow, he's so bad in coverage and this, that. Donta Hightower is a borderline Hall of Fame player. It's not because of anything he's ever done in coverage, right? I mean, he's a physical downhill thumping style linebacker. He's actually very good at play action recognition. But other than that, if you get him into a zone drop or if you get him into man coverage, he's always been vulnerable in pass coverage. So to me, this is more of people losing sight of what exactly has made Hightower great here in New England and forgetting that every player has got things that they're not as good at. Now, nobody's the perfect player, unless maybe you're talking at that position like Bobby Wagner, who can pretty much do everything. But there's very few guys that are perfect players, all around perfect players. And Hightower does have some athletic deficiency in space, but he's always made up for it in different ways.
I think the other part of this is just he didn't play football for a year. And it's a process of getting back into it. Like we saw with Rob Gronkowski last year coming off his retirement. I know that's a comparison a lot of people have made. I'm sure this isn't to say Donta Hightower didn't put the work in. I'm sure he did last year when he was out. He put in the work in camp, all of that. But, there's only so much you can do. You can't simulate live action NFL football. You just have to experience that. And Brandon Bolden said there was a little bit of an adjustment for him about a month. And whether or not he'd admit it, I'm sure it was the same thing for Donta Hightower. Other players have said it. So I think he's just, back in the groove of things, back in the swing of things physically. And we know what kind of player he is mentally and what he brings as a leader. So yeah, I think he's just comfortable. He looks more comfortable now than he did earlier in the season, and comfort on the football field can go a long way.
Yeah, I agree. All right, two last questions here. I'll start with this one, and then I'm gonna some low hanging fruit here for you, Alex, in a second. But let's start with this question here. Do we think that the Patriots are gonna install something or have something up their sleeves coming out of this bye week for the stretch run that they might use that they haven't shown already? I'm not going to say RPOs because they're just not going to do it. So I'm not going to mention it as much as I wish that they would.
You need to ask Bill about it. Because remember when you asked him about Jonnu Smith not getting the ball, and then they gave the ball to Jonnu Smith on 6 straight plays?
Yeah, I mean, I asked McDaniels about it, and he gave me some boring answer about how they don't major in it, but it's in their bag, and I'm like, it's not in your bag enough when Mac Jones shredded the FBS on RPOs his last year at Alabama. Maybe we're not going to do it. They're not going to do it, so we're not going to do it. But is there something else in their bag that you might think, just in general, do you think something is coming, or you might think of have an idea of what might be coming?
Yeah, I mean, they generally run a trick play coming out of the bye, so I think we'll see something goofy this week. I think they have a lot of setup plays, a lot of the motion they've been doing in some of these end arounds to Kendrick Bourne, right, that were running the last couple of weeks. They ran one to Nelson Aguilar last week against the Bills. It does look like they are setting something up. I don't know that would necessarily be installed during the bye week, right? To set it up, you already have to know what it is, but they go deep in the bag. Maybe not deep enough for the RPOs, but everything else.
Oh,
Wouldn't be surprised. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I do wonder if there's a Jonnu Smith iteration of the playbook that is not quite.
That's the big one.
Dusted off yet, especially in the red zone. I'm not as concerned about Jonnu Smith catching the ball they're moving the ball between the 20s. Like, that's not the concern here, right? I mean, they're getting the ball into scoring territory. They're number one in the league in scoring efficiency on per drive basis. So they are moving the ball plenty between the 20s. The problem is they got to get more touchdowns in the red zone. I wrote about that last week. I know a lot of people have talked about this. Ranking 26th in the red zone in terms of touchdown efficiency and kicking as many field goals as the Patriots are kicking, that's eventually, it feels like it might get them beat in the playoffs, right? It feels like an offense that makes you score in the 30s, that makes you put up points. Eventually kicking all those field goals is going to come back to bite you. So hopefully there's a Jonnu Smith, N'Keal Harry, Nelson, I don't know, someone else in that group, right? Because I think right now in the red area, every team knows that they're trying to get the ball to Hunter Henry. And he's been kind of game planned for in that area of the field. So you have to have one other answer up your sleeve. They know about the power run game. They know about Hunter Henry. Everybody's game planned against those two things in the red zone. So somebody else needs to emerge. Kendrick Bourne might be that guy. He had the big touchdown in the red zone against Tennessee, right? The poster eyes of Kevin Byard. Maybe he's a guy that can evolve into that sort of role in the red area, but I'm interested to see if they can get Johnny more involved. All right, here's the low-hanging fruit for you, Alex. Here's the question that you have been waiting to answer.
Is it the stadium one? Because, let's talk about the draft a little bit. It's the bye week.
No. It's about the draft, and here is the question that you have been waiting to answer all season long. Who is the next Alabama player that Bill Belichick is going to draft? Alex, you have the stage.
Well, so I'm on record. I really like Henry To'oTo'o, the middle linebacker, and I think they will like him a lot too. Now, will they have a chance to draft him? He's a guy who's probably going to move up during the combine process. I think he ends up being a middle second round pick. So unless they reach on him in the first round, I don't know. Guys I would really like to see them take a shot at Shahlil Billingsley. To me, he's like a 6'3", 220-pound Tyreek Hill. It's not quite as fast, but it's that same idea where he can kind of move him all over the formation. I don't think they'll take him. The guy I look at, and I realistically think, okay, where will they be picking? What do they need? What kind of players do they like? If it's not To'oTo'o, I think Josh Jobe, the corner, is a guy that they might really be interested in. Again, they need a corner. He's a true outside cornerback. There's a couple guys in their secondary I like. I hadn't honestly focused a ton on Jordan Battle. I thought he played really well in the SEC championship game against Georgia, the safety. So really anybody in that secondary or Henry To'oTo'o. I'm gonna go with those guys. I'm making sure I'm not missing anybody here. What's 18? The guy I text you about every week.
18.
Yeah. He plays quarterback. He plays receiver. He plays safety. He covers kicks. He returns kicks. He's a 2-year captain. He's a 5-year player. Why can't I think of his name? Hang on.
You're killing me. I want to talk about a few guys first before when you're finding that name.
I have it. Hang on. I have it right here.
Yeah.
Slade Bolden.
Slade. Oh my God. No.
I don't know how I forgot about Slade Bolden.
Slade Bolden Alex has been telling me about Slade Bolden. It seems like Slade Bolden's been at Alabama for
He's
8
been there
years.
for 5 years. He's
Yeah.
been there for, maybe 6 actually.
He's been there for 100 years. This guy is the pesky little slot receiver that the Patriots have.
Okay, but he also plays safety.
Yes.
And quarterback.
Yeah. So I know in the chat, I know on Twitter, I know everybody under the sun wants the Patriots to draft John Mechie, right? Everybody does. Now, my question is, because I don't hate it, if John Mechie's ACL kicks him out of the first, down into the second round, right? Because if the Patriots get good info from Nick Saban that Mechie's knee is going to be fine, and that he's just, going to go through the normal ACL recovery and he's going to be back on the field, maybe not even next year, but maybe it ends up being in 2023. I don't hate at all with their situation, with how many veterans they already have on the roster. I don't mind at all them redshirting John Mechie and then getting a first-round talent in 2023 that they got in the second or third round in 2022. Kind of like a Cameron McGurn situation.
So I was going to say, I think the interesting thing about it is, would the Patriots do something like this? Let's look at the historical context.
Yeah.
Yes, they very much would. And I think what helps them is this is a really, really, really good receiver class. Another one. Shocker, right? Garrett Wilson. I mean, Garrett Wilson, if the Patriots could have any player in the draft, they're not going to have a chance to draft him, but if they could have any player in the draft, it might be Garrett Wilson. Olave, Treylon Burks, Drake London, Jamison Williams, Jahan Dotson, George Pickens, Wan'Dale Robinson. I mean, I'm reading off the list, but I don't want to miss anybody. The point is, there is teams aren't just going to pass on John Mechie. He's incredibly talented, but I think that there's enough talent in this class that the third round is the sweet spot. I don't think Bill uses a top 60 pick, especially when corner and tackle are both immediate needs. I don't think Bill uses a top 60 pick on a player who's not going to play. But if John Mechie's there in the third round, especially if they can move up and maybe grab a comp pick from somebody in the third round, like, you're in the sweet spot there. So if you want John Mechie to the Patriots, I don't think it's unrealistic, but the Zay Flowers of the world, the Justin Rosses, you got to be rooting for those guys to kill it at the combine, kill it at the pro day, because the reality is you're looking for those guys to drop off, and because Mechie can't raise his stock right now, he can only lower it. You need those guys to lower Mechie's stock. And in the third round, I think we can talk about it.
Yeah, so he's not quite as big as N'Keal. I thought Mechie, he plays bigger than he actually is listed as. So he's listed at 6 foot 195. I think he might be like 6'1", but he feels like the type of receiver that maybe they thought that they were going to get with N'Keal Harry, that N'Keal Harry just never into.
You think so? Mechie's a much better route runner, and he's not as much a contested catch guy.
I just feel like he's the bigger receiver that can move around the formation, that can block a little bit. I don't know if he's necessarily a contested catch guy, but I have been impressed by the opportunities that I've seen him have in those types of situations. But he can run routes, right? So I feel like I thought he was bigger than he actually is. So maybe that's part of it here.
Yeah, he's not nearly big enough for that comparison.
Yeah. So maybe I'm a little bit off on the size comparison, but I don't know. What he makes up for it in route running feels like a nice transition, right? You know what I mean? Like,
if you want the guy who's like a better N'Keal Harry in this draft, it's Treylon Burks from Arkansas, who I like. I don't think they'll get a chance to get Treylon Burks. Like, if you want to talk about Patriots first round receivers, I think you're looking at Treylon Burks, and I think you're looking at Drake London, maybe Jahan Dotson. Like, he's a late first, early second guy. If they really make a run in the playoffs, or if Dotson really kills it, Dotson I like. Dotson, I think, would be a good fit for them because he's a good route runner. He's a good hands catcher. He's a downfield threat. I think he's a guy who could maybe play the role they have. I'm not saying he's a better player than Nelson Aguilar, but I wonder if in a year or two, he could play the role Nelson Aguilar is playing a little better than Aguilar is playing it right now. So, if they're going to go in the first round, that's the guy I'm looking at is Jahan Dotson. And I love Drake London. You can't not love Drake London. But I think Drake London will be off the board before they pick.
Yeah, so the other Alabama receiver, Williams, guy,
he's good.
He's going top 10.
And he covers punts. He covered. He was their primary.
Top 10.
So he not only was he their leading receiver this year, Jamison Williams. Not only was he Alabama's leading receiver, and keep in mind, this is one of the best passing offense in college football. He's out there covering punts on every single kick.
Yeah, no,
you don't tell me Bill Belichick doesn't want that guy.
Too bad. He's going.
Yeah,
top,
he's going top. You're right.
I think you don't run like that and last long, right? Like you just don't. You look at Jalen Waddle. You look at John Ross, even, right? I mean, you run like that, and he's got size too. James Williams is
a big dude.
Yeah, he's not just he's big. So I don't know. He's going top 10. All right. That's been your college football hour with Alex Barth. We'll be back on the show on Thursday to preview Patriots.
We're not even gonna do the stadium upgrades.
You want to go ahead? Give me your 1 minute take on the stadium upgrade.
It pushes off them having to build a new stadium for a little bit. I don't think the wind advantage is gone. I think it's lessened, but if you look, there's still there's opportunity for some weird wind tunnels there to that end. It'll be interesting, but it's going to look cool. And, I like that they're accentuating the lighthouse, I guess. I don't know. It's cool. I've mixed opinions on it. We can't call it the open end of the stadium anymore. I guess we call it the new end of the stadium. We need new terminology.
That's the tough part. Is it's so easy the geography was so easy to understand. Open end, closed end.
Well, I think new end works, right? The new end of the stadium. Sure. It's gonna be kind of cool. There's an observation deck up there though. That'll be neat.
I thought that was your bedroom.
Well, it was. Now they're kicking me out. It's Matt Dollif's running joke is that I live in the lighthouse and I zip line down to the practice fields.
I think you might. I think he's onto something. But yeah, I don't hate it. I think it's nice. Look, I think the stadium needed something that had a little bit more, pizzazz, right? Like a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. Right now, the lighthouse is cool. I always liked the lighthouse. I end up keeping the lighthouse, but it does feel outside of the lighthouse like a pretty generic, built in the early 2000s NFL football stadium, right? It's just there's not much character to it outside of the lighthouse. So I do like the fact that they are adding a little bit more spice, and they're not building a new stadium, knocking this one down and building a monstrosity like we're seeing, in some other places quite yet. I don't want one of those. Look, I was down, we went to Atlanta for the Super Bowl in 2018. I was down there for Pat's Falcons. I couldn't find anywhere. I didn't know where to go. Like the place is just, it is so giant. It's its own city, it's just so big. And I just don't think that is like, I just don't have any interest in a stadium like that. I just don't. And I'm not even talking about the dome aspect of it.
No dome. This is not Buffalo. Side. They should not build the dome here.
Yeah. It just way too many, way too big, everything. I hated everything about it. All right. Thursday show, Patriots Colts preview. I'm really excited to break this one down. So we'll be back on Thursday afternoon around 4:00, around the same time as usual. And we'll definitely tease it out on Twitter and all the social medias and stuff like that, so you guys know when and where to find us on Thursday. Pat's Colts preview. Then we'll get it same schedule as usual next week on the Tuesday, Friday. Look ahead on Friday, Tuesday recap show, and we'll get into some more things next week as well. But thanks so much for doing the Q&A. We're going to do it again sometime soon. We enjoy doing them, so we'll try to do a few more of them before the regular season is over. And final month here, Alex, home stretch, at least for the regular season.
Hopefully we have more than a month left.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So, look, the Patriots, I don't want to count the chickens or whatever, but there's a very, very good chance that we're going to have more than a month left. So you're going to keep it right here. Patriots Press Pass, Patriots Beat Podcast. And we are going to cover the Patriots all the way through the end of their season. Hopefully it ends in Los Angeles, sunny Los Angeles this year for the Super Bowl. But we'll be right here with you the whole rest of the way on Pat's Beat. So thanks so much for watching, guys. And once again, we'll see you Thursday night for the preview show of Colts Patriots on Saturday night. Thanks again, and we'll see you then.